Your brain keeps working at night because that is when the system tries to resolve what it could not organize during the day. It is not insomnia, it is not anxiety, it is not lack of discipline, it is unfinished activity. See if this sounds familiar. Your body is tired, your eyes feel heavy, but your mind stays active. Thoughts appear, memories surface, ideas begin to take shape, and the more you try to sleep, the more awake your mind seems to become. That creates a strange feeling, as if your brain were working against you, as if something were wrong. But in reality, the opposite is happening. Your brain is trying to help. It is trying to finish the day. There is a fundamental principle in the biology of behavior. The nervous system does not rest while it perceives something incomplete. As long as something remains pending, something uncertain, something undefined, the brain stays active. Because activity means protection, and protection is a priority. Notice that the human brain was designed to anticipate, to predict, to prepare, long before technology existed, long before routine existed, long before comfort existed. Survival depended on noticing signals, on identifying changes, on detecting risk. That mechanism is still present today, even if danger has changed, even if the environment is safe, even if life is stable. The brain keeps monitoring, and nighttime is when that monitoring becomes more visible. Not because the brain works more at night, but because the world becomes quiet. During the day, the mind is occupied. There are tasks, conversations, movement, responsibilities. These stimuli keep attention directed outward. But when night arrives, everything slows down. The environment becomes still. The pace decreases. Distractions disappear. And then something important happens. Attention turns inward. At that moment, the brain begins to review. Review what happened. Review what remained unfinished. Review what still needs to be resolved. This process is not a defect. It is a natural mechanism, a mechanism of organization, a mechanism of safety. Have you ever noticed how many ideas appear precisely when you lie down? That is not coincidence, it is neurophysiology. When the body reduces external stimulation, the brain gains space to process internal information. This phenomenon is widely studied in cognitive neuroscience. The brain needs to reorganize experiences. It needs to consolidate memories. It needs to update decisions. This work happens mainly during periods of low stimulation, especially at night. Think about it. Thinking at night does not mean something is wrong. It means processing. It means integration. It means preparation. Consider another fascinating detail. The brain does not distinguish between physical tasks and mental tasks. Solving a problem, making a decision, handling a concern, all of this requires energy. All of this requires attention. All of this generates neural activation. If those tasks were not completed during the day, the system tries to complete them at night, even if only mentally, even if you are lying down, even if the environment is quiet. There is an important concept in cognitive psychology called an open loop. Whenever a task remains incomplete, the brain keeps a record of it. It maintains partial attention. It maintains vigilance. That record remains active until closure happens, or until the system perceives predictability. This phenomenon is known as the Zeigarnik effect, a classic discovery in psychology. Unfinished tasks occupy mental space, even when you try to ignore them, even when you try to rest. The brain keeps monitoring, not out of stubbornness, but out of protection. Now notice something that few people realize. The problem is not the night. The problem is accumulation. Accumulation of decisions. Accumulation of responsibilities. Accumulation of information, accumulation of stimulation. Throughout the day, the brain receives thousands of inputs, conversations, messages, news, images, demands. Each piece of information needs to be processed, it needs to be classified, it needs to be stored. This processing does not happen instantly, it happens gradually, and very often it continues after the day has ended. Have you ever noticed that the more intense your day was, the more active your mind becomes at night? That happens because the volume of information was greater. The greater the volume, the greater the processing. The greater the processing, the greater the mental activity. This principle appears across many areas of knowledge: in neuroscience, in behavioral psychology, in stress physiology, even in physical training. When the body is pushed, it needs time to recover. When the mind is pushed, it also needs time to reorganize. Without that time, the system remains active. There is another factor worth paying attention to. The brain functions based on predictability. When it knows what to expect, it relaxes. When it does not know what to expect, it stays alert. Uncertainty keeps the system active. That is why unresolved situations often appear in nighttime thoughts. Conversations that were not finished, decisions that were not made, problems that were not resolved. These elements create instability, and instability generates vigilance. Notice something important. Your brain is not trying to bother you. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to reduce risk. It is trying to increase control. This behavior is automatic, and automatic means outside conscious will. Now imagine a system that spent the entire day solving problems, making decisions, responding to demands, holding responsibility. When night arrives, that system does not switch off immediately. It slows down, gradually, progressively. That process depends on safety. It depends on stability. It depends on predictability. Without those elements, the mind remains active. There is also an important biological aspect. The human body follows natural rhythms, known as circadian rhythms. These rhythms regulate sleep, regulate energy, regulate temperature, regulate attention. During the night, the body begins to reduce activation, but that reduction does not happen instantly. It happens in stages. First, the body reduces movement. Then, it lowers temperature. Then, it reduces vigilance. If the system still perceives unfinished business, that transition becomes slower. That is why some people take longer to fall asleep, not because they are not tired, but because the brain is still occupied. Another detail deserves attention: the role of emotions. Throughout the day, many emotions are suppressed, ignored, postponed, placed in the background. But emotions do not disappear. They remain recorded. And when silence arrives, they reappear. Not as problems, but as signals. The brain tries to understand, tries to integrate, tries to make sense. That process can show up as repetitive thinking, as prolonged reflection, as the feeling of a racing mind. There is also a physiological explanation. The human brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy. Even at rest, even during sleep, it remains active, maintaining functions, regulating systems, protecting the organism. That means mental activity never completely disappears. It only changes in intensity. Consider something important. True rest does not happen when the body stops. True rest happens when the system perceives safety. Without that perception, the mind keeps monitoring, keeps evaluating, keeps functioning, even at night. This understanding changes how we interpret insomnia. It is not lack of ability. It is not personal failure. It is protective activity, and protection is a biological priority. Another interesting point involves responsibility. The greater the responsibility, the greater the vigilance. The greater the vigilance, the longer it takes for the brain to slow down. That is why responsible people often have more difficulty switching off their minds, not because of weakness, but because of commitment. Now notice a common pattern. The more you try to force sleep, the farther away it seems. That happens because effort increases activation. Activation maintains vigilance. Vigilance prevents relaxation. On the other hand, when the system perceives safety, sleep happens naturally, without effort, without control, without pressure. This principle appears across many areas of physiology. The body functions better when there is trust, not when there is tension. And this brings us to an important realization. Your brain is not against you. It is working for you. It is trying to finish what remained open. It is trying to create stability. It is trying to guarantee safety. And that leads us to the next question. If the brain keeps working at night, If the mind stays active in silence, if sleep takes longer to arrive, then an inevitable question appears. What exactly is the brain trying to resolve when night comes? That question completely changes the way we look at an active mind. Because when you understand what is happening inside, the experience stops feeling like a problem and starts making sense. Most of the time, the brain is not trying to create new thoughts. It is trying to organize the ones that already exist. It is trying to give shape to what is still unclear. It is trying to close what remained open. Think about something simple. Throughout the day, you make dozens of decisions. Some small, some important, many fast, some incomplete. Each decision requires energy, requires attention, requires evaluation. And not all of those decisions reach a clear conclusion. Some remain suspended, some remain undefined, some remain waiting for an answer. Those decisions do not disappear. They remain registered as pending mental tasks, and pending tasks keep the brain active. That happens because the brain was designed to seek closure, to reduce uncertainty, to create predictability. Without predictability, the system stays alert. Notice that the human mind functions as a prediction system. It tries to anticipate the future. It tries to calculate possibilities. It tries to reduce risk. That process happens constantly, but it becomes more visible at night, when the environment becomes quiet, when pressure decreases, when the pace slows down. At that moment, the brain gains space to review, and reviewing requires activity. There is a well-documented phenomenon in neuroscience called offline processing. During periods of rest, the brain continues working, reorganizing memories, refining decisions, simulating scenarios. This process improves learning, improves adaptation, improves survival, but it also keeps the mind active, especially when unresolved issues exist. Notice something interesting. The mind rarely reviews what is already resolved. It reviews what is still uncertain, what still creates doubt, what still requires decision. This selection is not random. It is strategic. The brain prioritizes what represents risk, or responsibility, or consequence. That is why nighttime thoughts often involve meaningful areas of life: relationships, work, health, finances, future. These areas carry significance, and significance holds attention. Another relevant detail involves emotional memory. Experiences that created emotional impact are processed more intensely because emotions signal relevance, signal importance, signal the need for learning. If something generated concern, frustration, insecurity, the brain tries to understand, tries to interpret, tries to extract meaning. That process can happen hours after the event, especially at night, when distraction is reduced. Consider this carefully. Silence does not create thoughts. Silence reveals thoughts. During the day, external stimuli compete for attention: messages, conversations, movement, sound. These stimuli occupy mental space. But when they disappear, internal content becomes visible. That is when the mind begins working with what has been stored. Another important aspect involves the body. The body and mind function as an integrated system. If the body remained tense during the day, the brain remains alert. If the body stayed under pressure, the brain maintains vigilance. That physiological state does not disappear immediately. It fades gradually. That process depends on time, depends on safety, depends on stability. Now think about a familiar experience. You solve a difficult problem. Hours later, while relaxing, a new idea appears. A solution emerges. An answer becomes clear. That happens because the brain continued working in the background. This type of processing is known as cognitive incubation, a mechanism studied in psychology and neuroscience. When you step away from a problem, the brain keeps analyzing, keeps testing possibilities, keeps organizing information without conscious effort. This mechanism explains why many ideas appear at night, or in the shower, or during moments of rest. It is not coincidence. It is silent activity. Another point worth noticing involves responsibility and vigilance. People who carry many responsibilities tend to maintain prolonged attention. They need to anticipate. They need to plan. They need to avoid mistakes. That pattern creates a continuous state of alertness, a state that takes longer to slow down, even after the tasks are finished. This phenomenon is observed across many professions, in medicine, in education, in leadership, in parenting. The greater the perceived responsibility, the longer it takes to switch off the mind. That is not weakness. It is commitment. It is care. It is protection. Now observe an important physiological detail. The brain does not work only with thoughts. It works with bodily signals, heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, hormonal levels. If the body remains activated, the brain interprets that as a signal of alert and maintains vigilance. This mechanism explains why stimulating activities at night make sleep more difficult. Bright light, screens, notifications, movement. These stimuli send signals of activity, and activity keeps the system awake. On the other hand, signals of calm support slowing down. A quiet environment, soft lighting, predictable rhythm, steady breathing. These signals indicate safety, and safety allows relaxation. There is also a fundamental biological factor. The human brain seeks coherence. It tries to align experiences. It tries to create meaning. It tries to organize narratives. When something does not make sense, the system keeps analyzing, keeps reviewing, keeps trying to understand. This process is essential for adaptation, but it also keeps the mind active, especially when unanswered questions remain. For example, an ambiguous conversation, an uncertain decision, an undefined situation. These events create gaps, and gaps keep the brain working. Another interesting phenomenon appears in the relationship between control and predictability. When you feel in control of life, the brain relaxes. When unpredictability exists, the brain stays alert. That happens because the system was designed to detect risk, and uncertainty represents potential risk, even when danger is not real. Now consider something many people notice but do not fully understand. The quieter the night becomes, the louder the mind seems. That happens because contrast increases. Without external stimulation, any thought becomes more noticeable. Without noise, any concern becomes more audible. That effect does not indicate a bigger problem. It indicates increased perception. Another relevant detail involves learning. The brain learns through repetition. If the mind remains active every night, that pattern strengthens. If the mind gradually slows down, that pattern also strengthens. The system records experience and repeats what becomes familiar. Now think about something simple. If for many days the brain kept working late, it begins to expect activity at that time. It prepares to think, prepares to review, prepares to plan. That conditioning creates habit, and habit operates automatically. Another important aspect involves the sense of urgency. Even when there is no real emergency, the body may maintain a sense of readiness. This state is known as anticipatory vigilance, a mechanism that prepares the organism to act. This mechanism was essential for survival, but in modern environments, it can persist, especially in responsible people, attentive people, committed people. Now notice something fundamental. An active mind at night does not mean a problem. It means functioning. It means processing. It means adaptation. This understanding reduces fear, reduces frustration, reduces resistance. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: a busy mind at night is not a defect. It is a signal that the brain is still working, still organizing, still transforming experiences into understanding. Because true rest does not begin when the body stops. It begins when the system understands that the day has ended, when predictability exists, when safety exists, when closure exists. See if any of these ideas made sense to you. Perhaps it was realizing that silence does not create thoughts. Silence reveals thoughts. Or perhaps it was understanding that the brain keeps working even when you are resting, a process that science calls offline processing, where the mind organizes information while the body rests. You may have discovered the concept of cognitive incubation when you step away from a problem and the brain continues analyzing in the background. Or maybe something simpler caught your attention, like noticing that the brain does not work only with thoughts. It works with bodily signals, or recognizing that the quieter the night becomes, the louder the mind seems, or understanding what we call anticipatory vigilance, a natural mechanism that prepares the organism to act. If any of these ideas made sense to you, write in the comments which concept stood out the most, because clarity often begins when we can name what is happening, and sharing that insight can help someone else understand their own mind. Now, a natural question begins to emerge. If the brain keeps working at night, if the mind stays active even when the body is tired, if the system takes time to switch off, then why, at certain moments, does it seem like the brain is trying to protect you, even when there is no danger? That is exactly the question we will explore in the next video. Why are you not losing control? Why is your brain trying to protect you?